Lawyers of Reddit, at what point, when working for a defendant, did you realize, my client is a monster? A lot of years ago I used to work as a solicitor's representative. Cases go to Crown Court, barrister deals and I am there for paperwork, additional stuff with client etc. 70-something-year-old man had been in jail for 15 years for an assault on a child. Solicitor and barrister working on getting him released due to him getting clean reports from just about everyone. Guards took him out of jail to a dentist and as he entered the waiting room he saw two children and ran straight at them. Guards stopped him. 3 weeks later at court I was the one that sat him down in a room to explain that no, this isn't a hearing to release you. It is so you can be committed to a mental health secure facility for the rest of your life. He didn't take that wheel. I shed no tears. Well, that's absolutely terrifying. He was obviously ill, but I wonder what was going on in his brain to instantly try and attack them. Damn kids wouldn't stay off his lawn. Not the client but my managing partner. The client was a senile 90-year-old man. He wanted to sell land worth a little less than $1 billion to some businessman. Suffice to say there were many who wanted to take advantage of the situation. One such person, to my dismay, was our managing partner. The partner wanted to insert a provision that would have effectively funneled about 60% of the proceeds solely to him. You could see how his eyes gleamed at the mere mention of money. The provision got lost in the revisions. I was doing the revisions. I'm no longer part of that scummy firm. Did you consider bringing it to whatever governing body you're under? This sounds like legal malpractice. Hi, law student here, just took a professional responsibility course. Def legal malpractice. Lawyers aren't allowed to acquire an interest in a client's business except in very narrow circumstances, none of which fit the case here. We had a client try and enforce a post-employment restraint against a 19-year-old receptionist after she quit and started working for a competitor. The reason? He wanted to make her life hell because she wouldn't sleep with him, a creepy 57-year-old man. Him trying to sleep with her was the reason she quit. Unsurprisingly, he didn't take our advice to discontinue his claim and so we ended up sending him elsewhere. My wife had a similar asshole boss. She worked for a company that recruited nurses. They had a horribly written non-compete agreement that basically restricted you from working in the medical field for 5 years and within 500 miles. Too restrictive. She would also forge signatures by cutting and pasting in Adobe. So, wife eventually quits and works at a similar job. She had never signed the non-compete and we knew it. Well, we get a letter from her attorney with a signed non-compete. I called up the attorney. I told him that we were willing to take this controversy to trial. But in an act of good faith I wanted him to send me the original PDF file of the document and make the wet ink original available for inspection at his office and we could attempt to resolve this out of court. We never heard from him again, but my wife's current employer did. They threatened to sue them if they didn't fire her. Well, my wife then had to explain the situation to her new boss and their attorneys. Well, new company and old company had a mutual client. New boss felt he had an obligation, just wanted to poach the jobs, to inform the client of the fraud allegations and advised them to do a full audit of the original records. They did and ended up ending their contract with wife's old company. We get a letter from a new attorney. This time threatening to sue and claiming millions in damages for divulging trade secrets. Call this new attorney and advise that the trade secrets were fraud and it was divulged through the course of pending litigation brought by his client. Never heard from them after that. Oh, I can share a good story. I had a teacher in high school who was a former lawyer. We always asked him why he gave up his practice to start teaching. He finally caved and explained that his last case was the defense of 3 people. Apparently there had been a 4th. It was two couples, who in the act of a drunken, drugged-out orgy, decided to kill, partially eat, and dismember one of the women. I guess it seemed like a good idea at the time. As a lawyer, he said it was pretty open and shut, but he had to get his clients the best result possible, and he was exposed to all the horrid details, the pictures, and their reasoning. My teacher had such a far-off look when he explained it that we could see it really got to him. Had a divorce client, husband and father, who disowned his autistic son. Tried to argue that he should get all of his wife's retirement having not worked for 12 years. Contacted me during the height of Hurricane Sandy. He was in the Bronx and me in Manhattan, saying he wanted to hold his wife in contempt for not paying him that day while the storm slammed NYC. Told me I was making a huge mistake getting married. My wedding date was November 3rd, 4 days after Sandy, saying that I was going to be miserable and regret it. I could go on. But, the worst was when, several months later, since his divorce was taking a long time, he sent death threat letters to myself and my wife saying that he had hired an executor to kill the two of us if his divorce wasn't finalized in 60 days. Called the police and they said he left his premises 1 day earlier. I heard nothing from him until February 2014 when he emailed me saying he needed a winter coat from his wife and could I help get it for him. Ironically, the divorce didn't have to be completed because he killed himself before the judge signed the judgment of divorce. TL, doctor, miserable guy who wanted to spread his misery, and crossed the line when he threatened to kill my wife. Edit, for something a little lighter. This Memorial Day weekend reminds me of not my worst client, but definitely my dumbest. I was representing her on a child custody and child support matter. She was calling me on Memorial Day saying she really needed to speak to me. I called her back and asked if it was urgent since it was Memorial Day and all. She said, "Oh, I didn't think that Jews celebrated Memorial Day, so I thought you were going to be available." The first week I started at my current criminal defense firm I was tasked with cataloging discovery from our client's phone. The phone had multiple, talking around 4,000, videos, photos, text exchanges with women under 16, though not all of the girls' ages were confirmed. Most, if not all, were under the legal age of consent and many were barely pubescent, naked and being prostituted over 1 year. He would lease girls in exchange for drugs. Nothing felt totally bizarre until I came across one video where he was clearly forcing himself upon a literal child who was so high on benzodiazepines, not willingly but rather forced, and choking her in the process. When our firm confronted him, he said he was in love with her and that's why he did it. He would also take these girls to hotels and make them have sex with one another while he taped, but nothing beat what I said above. Pretty horrifying stuff for my first week on the job. Not a lawyer but I worked in a federal prison. Several inmates come to mind but the one I'll tell about is a former Catholic priest. He'd given up his vocation years before but he got caught up in a child porn sting. At that time sentencing was based on how many images a suspect had. He had thousands and was facing a maximum of 40 years. The guy was in his 50s so that would have been essentially a genuine life sentence, since federal inmates can only earn 15% good time. At his sentencing hearing, and I read this transcript so I know this as a fact, he told the judge when he was a priest he'd molested hundreds of young boys. Despite treatment and his own remorse he felt completely incapable of stopping his obsession with child porn and with molestation. He had not ever been even charged with these crimes but he felt guilty enough to admit them and then ask the judge to impose the full penalty so he'd be locked up for the rest of his life. Oh man, I'm always late when I have a good one. Not a defendant, but a divorce. Client is a late 30s woman, 2 kids, idyllic suburban life with her, incredibly lucrative medical profession, husband. He caught her cheating. He wanted to patch things up, she decided on a divorce. So far, nothing out of the ordinary, unfortunately. Then I start getting the details. He caught her on his birthday. In their bed. While the kids were downstairs. Dude decided to come home early as a surprise, and his wife was getting dicked down by a 19-year-old. But wait. There's more. Really fun stuff from the husband. Guy had been treated for gonorrhea twice, and both times he had caught it from his wife. The second kid wasn't his. It was obvious because the child was 100% some race, and the dad was not that race. Bad stuff, right? Well, enter the texts, emails, etc. she was carrying on like a dozen affairs at any given time. Spanning years. She would bring them home, and tell the kids they were electricians, plumbers, etc. She'd fuck other guys within minutes of dropping her kids off at school. I've met some awful people in my time, but this woman straight up told me how much this guy loved her and how she manipulated the shit out of him. He knew about a lot of the stuff, and each time he found something new he just tried to win her back. I don't want to go into the details of what happened, but some money that you get you don't really want.